it's now time for another Second World War story, since I'm told you like the first one. When the war was at its peak, forces would often airdrop leaflets into enemy territory, and these leaflets would contain anti-government propaganda and fake stories. And these leaflets were printed with the aim to convince the population to not support their government, to not go to the trenches. This was propaganda warfare, the Second World War. Today, this war has moved online. The internet has become the battlefield. You could say that the side that writes a better social media post wins this war. The final session of the WION Global Summit deals with digital warfare.
There was a 300% increase in cybercrimes during the pandemic. Also, a 600% increase in malicious emails. Not all wars involve a military or blood. Some are fought over the internet. Some are fought over narratives. The side with the better military no longer wins a war. It's the side that dominates the internet. The side that tells a better story wins today's battles. Session 4: Digital Warfare, Securing the World Wide Web. And the dialogue partners for this session are Konstantin Koshelenko, Deputy Minister of Social Policy, Ukraine. Supa Mandiwazira, former Minister of ICT, Postal and Cybersecurity, Zimbabwe. Barakat Alkindi, former Director for Digital Transformation, Abu Dhabi Police. Moderating this session is WION presenter Jasper Reed.
Welcome, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers. We're going to start today. We should have Konstantin joining us in a second. The cyber warfare subject is a huge subject and a very abstract subject in some ways. So we're going to start by making it very real and very personal. Konstantin and the people of Ukraine are at the front line of cyber war. And Konstantin, we're delighted to have you here. The question we want to ask you is, how are the Ukrainian people, the people on the ground, not the policymakers, using digital technology and social media to protect themselves during this war?
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you, Jasper. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Global Summit participants, partners and colleagues, digital transformation of the social sphere is one of the most important areas that the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine is working on. We actively developed digital services for citizens before the war and ensure the security and stability of social IT infrastructure during the war. We continue to support and build social services for citizens even during airstrikes, because the need for social protection of citizens has grown. Every Ukrainian has been vulnerable now. Millions of people who evacuated and those who remained in attacked cities also required protection. Our team ensured social payments to all citizens, and together with the Ministry of Digital Transformation and state banks, developed a technology that allows international charitable institutions to provide centralized cash support to Ukrainians. We automatically continue to provide social assistance, subsidies for housing and communal service without application, and simplified gratings for new recipients. This was made possible by a system of informational exchange between different state registers. As a result, more than 6 million people are covered by some form of social assistance. During Russian aggression, we financed all 100% of payments of subsidies, benefits, social benefits, and pensions. Even in regions where, due to hostilities or occupation, social security bodies do not work and cannot procure and finance these benefits. For international displaced persons, less than a month, the service of their registration was implemented through the use of DIA mobile application, and the social protection offices in the oblast. Payments of social assistance to them through bank cards we implemented also. But even if in peacetime, this aid was small in amount, and now it's not enough for normal life of our people. We also developed new international social platform, social.yedopomoga.gov.ua, which allows people from all over the world to provide targeted additional assistance to Ukrainians. Yedopomoga translates from Ukraine as e-help or is-help. The technology is simple and transparent. A beneficiary selects a request for product from registered Ukrainians in any region, pays by bank card, and the recipient receives a special code which pays for the products in partner supermarkets. This is similar to the technology of gift certificates in peacetime. This week, we integrated in all Ukrainian network of pharmacy into this platform, so you can help with medicine too. The minimum amount of aid is only $7 or 25 Tehran or 500 Indian rupees. This aid has a positive impact on the economy of Ukraine because it supports agro producers too. It also indirectly has a positive effect on food security around the world. The Yedopomoga technology will be able to help solve humanitarian crises in any country in the future. Please know that not only does it allow to targeted assistance for people, but it also supports national network of stores and the national manufacturers, as well as all employees of this company. Also, let's help Ukraine, and then the whole world will be able to use this technology for their needs. We continue the implementation of the United Informational System of the social sphere in Ukraine. We set a goal not just to put government services online, but to make them user-friendly. Simple application forms are created for people, and informational is automatically downloaded from all state registers, so that we do not have to fill them in manually or collect data on paper by citizens from various government bodies. Under work conditions, the implementation of the system has become even more important. It allows you to receive social service without leaving a safe place and without visiting government social offices in our cities.
Konstantin, let me step in there. That's fascinating insights that are hugely practical. Turning to our guests, Super and Barakat, I mean, both of you in different ways have been responsible for formulating strategies in your country to deal with cyber threats, to manage cybersecurity and cyber warfare. And here I should think that, Konstantin never imagined in his wildest dreams that he would have to put them into practical practice. But Barakat, tell us about Abu Dhabi. You're a very senior man in the Abu Dhabi police force. How have you thought about the scope of cybersecurity and cyber warfare, and what's your strategy in essence?
Yes, first of thing, I want to thank everybody who have offered his condolence, and it's really heart-touching. Thank you, everybody. I think when it comes for cyber security, it was always a priority for our government. we've seen that the UAE invested from beginning in digital transformation, and this was really a big asset for us to be ahead, offering all our services through online for the citizens and residents of UAE to benefit of it. And this asset need to be protected from whatever attacks can be done through the cyber crimes. So there was a strong strategy that helped us to leverage our capability. I think before 3 years, UAE was ranked around 35 in the level of cyber resilience over the world. And within 3 years, we jumped from that level to level 5. So that will show you how much we invested in that part.
But is that enough, Barakat? I mean, Keith Alexander, a former head of the NSA and cyber force in the States, has said that cyber warfare, and I quote, remains the exposed underbelly of democracies around the world. Have you done enough? Do you still feel vulnerable? Do you ever feel that you've done enough?
I think this is anybody working in cybersecurity or even in the IT will tell you enough is not enough. I mean, it's always a changing scenarios. Always there is a new thing happening. Always you are in a game of trying to catch up with the bad guys who also benefiting from the same tools that you are using. They are learning what the new technology can help them to harm others. And you also trying to benefit from that technology to protect yourself and protect your citizen from that danger.
And just bringing Super in. Super, you know, you've held this job in Zimbabwe. Does this all resonate with you? And also another question. I should think Mr. Alexander at the NSA had a rather sizable budget, which I'm sure when you were head of ICT, you might have dreamed of. But how have you thought this through, and how have you managed it when resources are necessarily constrained?
Thank you very much, Jasper. First of all, let me just express my deep gratitude to Sudhir Chaudhary, the CEO and editor-in-chief of WION, for inviting me to this summit. And like my colleagues, I would like to express my personal deep sense of loss and condolences to the people of the United Arab Emirates on the said loss of His Royal Highness Sheikh Khalifa. Just to give you some perspective on how this loss is being felt in Zimbabwe, in the last 3 years, the trade between Zimbabwe and United Arab Emirates has gone up from $400 million a year to 1.6 billion, making the UAE the second largest trading partner of Zimbabwe, and largely because of the vision of Sheikh Khalifa together with our President Emerson Mnangagwa. So this loss is being felt quite deeply, not just here, but also in Zimbabwe. Coming to your question, Jasper, I think the priorities are obviously very different coming from Africa, the UAE, Europe, and many other parts of the world. Our focus was largely to understand, in the first instance, what cybersecurity is about and what are the things to look out for. The infrastructure, building the infrastructure and making sure that we are looking at the basic things like data protection. There wasn't, and I don't think there's still at the moment, the focus on cyber warfare and how to defend territories, sovereignty in terms of cybersecurity. The focus in Zimbabwe, for instance, is how do we protect your data? How do we make sure that there is no interference with your bank accounts? How do we make sure that we protect the vulnerable from revenge pornography and things like that? That is still the main focus, as opposed to the broader view of cyber warfare or cyber security in that greater context.
So mainly defensive at this stage.
Mainly defensive, yes.
And here, if you look at it from if you look at it from a sort of philosophical, doctrinal perspective. I was talking with Jane before, one of our esteemed speakers from the States with a long history in the military and public policy and the rest of it. And she made a very interesting point, which was, how does government, and I'm going to put this to you, Super, and then to Barakat, how does government possibly control this when it doesn't actually control a whole bunch of the actors or components? I mean, how have you thought about that, Super? You take the question, then we'll get to Barakat.
It's a very difficult situation because internet didn't develop from Africa, it didn't develop from Zimbabwe. This is more developing from outside of an African continent, and as a result, we have no control over the infrastructure. We have no control over what the companies that are involved in providing bandwidth, in providing content are doing. And I think it's a conversation that is beginning to take place given what we have seen with the war in Ukraine. Because, you know, they say the first casualty of war is the truth. I think that adage must now change to say the first casualty of war is the internet. Because we had access in Africa to an alternative voice through YouTube, through satellite television, which is Russia Today, and we're also able to watch CNN and many other channels that were giving us reports. But because the narrative wasn't the one preferred by the businesses in North America and Europe, we were cut off from Russia Today. So we actually don't know the other side of the story. We only know one side of the story. And that is giving many governments and many people a rethink. Do we invest in our own infrastructure in order to be able to tell our own story? And I think WION has a very good example. In March, it was taken off YouTube simply because they had played a speech by the Russian president, which seemed to downplay the war in Ukraine, but also had played a speech by the Ukrainian foreign minister. But what that does is it makes us in Africa begin to think, if there's so much control on what can go out, what can we actually be doing? Building our own infrastructure, partnering with those that are affected to begin to build infrastructure. So it's a big question out there right now.
Okay, that's pretty interesting in terms of who's running the show. Super. Barakat, do you feel the same way? Do you feel that whatever you do, there's going to be a whole bunch of kind of technology oligarchs, whether it's Mr. Zuckerberg or, you know, all these fellows, Mr. Musk? Do you feel vulnerable in the same way?
Well, it is really true that what he said, that there is no big control from not only foreign countries, but also from big companies that actually own those information and can manipulate it and push it in a certain way. But what you can do within your boundary is to, first of all, make sure that the technology that...
Just lift your mic up.
Oh, okay. So I was saying that what you can do within your boundary with the things that you control, that starting from putting, making sure that the procedure that you follow, everybody can understand it. The government entities, the private sectors, everybody working together, because when it comes to the fight of cybersecurity, you cannot play it by yourself. You need the help of everybody. You can, the private sector have a major role in that, and also they are a major target for whatever attack, either like the banking sector or the medical sectors. So collaborative between those parties can help to make sure that you are in a certain way vulnerable to those attacks.
Well, and I guess it's an evolving story, but as an acid test of whether this is actually getting through, if you look at the audience here, hands up who feels well versed in cybersecurity and cyber war. So it's a leading question, Jane. Thank you. But I mean, it doesn't. So it's an interesting thing. Visa did a study recently that said that globally, over a third of businesses had left themselves almost entirely undefended. So is this Super, is it just simply a case that this has come up fast on us, it's a work in progress? Or are we living in this strange parallel universe where people don't actually think it's a threat?
Well, I must say that technology has run so fast ahead than the human being has been able to react. A lot of things have happened, development has happened technologically, that we've been so slow to adjust and to look at the risks. And I think that a lot of the issues are being addressed as we go on, but the technology is far ahead than we can actually do. For instance, in Zimbabwe, we're still putting together the laws in order to, protect the users. And yet, a lot of developments have already taken place, and we are behind in terms of our legislation. So what's actually taking place is that one needs to be moving also rapidly. But the process of making laws, the process of running governments is very bureaucratic. You can never be ahead of technology.
Okay, fair enough, Super. But just let's ask a fundamental question, which is, before we get to policies and lawmaking, etc. I mean, you're a member of parliament. You're an elected, experienced official. Amongst your peers, if you like, do you have a sense that the leaders of countries really even understand this subject?
Well, I think they do understand to the extent of it being a threat to their political stay in office. I think you have had a couple of examples in many parts of Africa where during election time, internet is throttled. That's when they begin to understand the realities of the internet, of cyber warfare, of cyber security. We have a law, for instance, in Zimbabwe that says no one can announce the result of an election. But in the world and the new technology world of the internet, somebody sitting in London can announce the result. So you can't control that person sitting in UAE posting results online. And this could be misleading results that could lead to people going onto the streets. So the reality is that the politicians are beginning to understand the risks only when it becomes to their power, not necessarily on a daily basis thinking about these things, because I think there's so many other challenges to think about in Africa. We've been talking about the war in Ukraine, in Africa, in Zimbabwe, in many countries surrounding Zimbabwe. We don't produce oil. So everybody is thinking about where do we get the next amount of money to increase our budget for the importation of oil. Our second staple is wheat, and we have always imported from Ukraine. And we're looking at alternative sources because of the disruption of the supply chain. So these are the things that the politicians are thinking about on a daily basis, and cybersecurity is right at the bottom of that list.
Yeah, until it affects their voters, as you say. I'm going to turn to Konstantin now. Konstantin, we're well aware that the war effort on the Ukrainian side is supported by a veritable legion of so-called kind of volunteer hackers or hacktivists, whether it's anonymous or new groups like Black Hawk or whoever. But there is a fundamental question about the ethics of that and the legality of it. And we've heard people say, well, an unprincipled enemy deserves unprincipled responses. But where do you draw the line between your civil defense and using third-party so-called hacktivists?
When we talk about cyber warfare, the reliable cyber warrior is the basis of the digital state, which we are going to build. Today, the cyber front is one of the most important in the war against the Russian aggressor. We are not only defending ourselves, but also actively fighting against the enemy. IT specialists and hackers joined together in the so-called IT army. There are currently over 300,000 people there. Every day, they independently identify targets and attack them together. We are actively in negotiation with international companies to prevent them from working with Russia.
And Barakat, would you conceptually, God forbid it ever happens, would you be conceptually comfortable with the idea of roping in, hacker farms and third-party nationals to support the defense of your nation state? Working
with private sectors, like companies that hack a farm or whatever, it can be done if it's legalized and within the ethics of that country. It's for sure that around the world there was a lot of attacks happened, and it was not from the country itself, but from a private hackathon, private sectors, and probably that was, with a collaboration. But we cannot approve it. There is no way. There is no like a digital fingerprint that can lead you directly to that accusation. So it's really a difficult question to answer. I mean, in a certain situation, probably you need the help from another party to protect you, to help you, to make sure that your system is much more stronger than vulnerable to other attacks. But it's, as I told you, it's a difficult question and depends on a lot of things.
Let me come in there. I think that it's a very tricky question because it brings about a lot of ethical issues. You're redefining the war, or what is known as war. War has always been fought on land, has been fought on the seas, in the air, in space. Now you're making the war be fought in cyberspace. You are legitimizing attacks on civilians, in my view, by allowing nationalists to put themselves together and become another third force in a war. Now, what that does is that if the opposing side bombs a building and justifies that they're in that building were people trying to hack into their systems, how do you then quarrel with them, because you are justifying the involvement of non-militants into the war?
Well, let's put this question to Konstantin, right? So you've got, as we said, a legion of third-party hackers working on your behalf. If, for whatever reason, that involves, to Supa's point, fatalities in either a third-party country or in your opponent's country, does that change the nature of the game, or is fundamentally all fair in love and war? Have we got Konstantin? I think you're on mute. Can you unmute Konstantin?
Okay, thank you. I think that our main goal is to defend our infrastructure, our IT infrastructure, and our people from the digital hacker attack. And people who works together and who makes IT army, it's the people who work because they are defending Ukraine from different countries, and they united to protect Ukraine.
But if what they do affects the civilians of Russia, does that change the equation?
I think the main goal is to defend.
Okay, understood. We've got a few more minutes. It's a massive topic. Super, please.
Yeah, just wanted to say that it's a very interesting question, because when the war started in Ukraine, the Russians targeted communications infrastructure, disrupt the internet, so the communication is very poor, so they can execute their war easily. Then you had Elon Musk respond to an inquiry or a request by a Ukrainian government official saying, help us with Starlink hardware, Starlink satellite services, which is a subsidiary of SpaceX. And Elon Musk responded by shipping this equipment to Ukraine and officials in Ukraine have confirmed that this internet access is helping the drones that are attacking the Russian soldiers.
And that crosses the line for you, does it?
I think it raises a lot of ethical issues where should then the Russians be attacking infrastructure owned by Elon Musk because he has decided to be a part of this war? Is he an accessory to the war? It's a very difficult question, and I think some red lines are being crossed, and we need a longer conversation about it.
Fair enough. If we had longer, we'd get Mr. Musk on the line to comment on this. But we've got a couple more minutes on this incredibly difficult topic. Let's wrap up with a couple of questions. One hope question, one fear question. Barakat, what's your greatest hope around cyber warfare? Or as the topic of this summit is, peace?
I think overall peace cannot be achieved without, the work of all countries together. Regular war, as we know it, have been there for thousands of years. And we achieved, through that time, like a Geneva Convention with a certain way regulate how the war is happening and what is allowed and what's not allowed. And we have been hearing from all the speakers about what we can do against regular war. The cyber war, it's a new war for us. There is no laws, there is nothing that a guideline that show the countries what is allowed and what is not allowed, like the debate we have right now regarding the third party. So I think all the countries need to work together to understand how to make the technology much peaceful, as we hoped from beginning that it will help humanity and things like that, and benefit from this chance to come out with agreement, sort of agreement between countries, how we can do that.
So collaborate, seize the day. Brigadier Al-Kindi, thank you so much. The Honourable Super Manda Wazara, let's finish off with you here. Biggest fears? Are you lying awake at night in a cold sweat worrying about this? Where do you think we're going with this?
The biggest fear is that for as long as we weaponize information, we weaponize the internet, it's going to create more and more chaos. I think the gains in terms of democracy, access to information that have been achieved over the last few decades will be wiped away because you're giving justification to dictatorships to switch off the internet as and when they want, because there's justification because the big countries are doing it. So the fear is we are going to go back to the age where everybody is just watching on their own territory and nobody cares what happens there. And I believe that we need a democratization of the investment space in services like YouTube, Google, and others. You cannot just allow a few companies in the West to invest heavily and the South isn't doing the same, because then the values of those in the West are imposed on you, and the values, because of our cultural differences, may actually be very different. So a conversation, I think, is required in order to democratize that space, in my view.
Super. That's a fantastic way for us to finish. As ever, ongoing conversation, and fascinating, of course, to be sitting between a dialectic of, a real war, and like all forms of war, it's unimaginable until you're in it, and those preparing for war or managing risks. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been an honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Gentlemen. And that brings us to the end of the 5th edition of the WION Global Summit. I would like to thank all of you for being a part of it This was much needed deliberation, and we could not have asked for better engagement. Like I told you, WION Global Summit was trending online. It gives our mission a sense of validation to see so many of you connecting with us. It tells us that even today people believe in peace. Even today people want to give peace a chance. And it's for their sake and ours, and also for the sake of our next generation, that each one of us must strive harder to secure peace on this planet. We must protect our societies from firearms, bioweapons, from countries that weaponize trade, and those that wage wars online. So we leave this room carrying forward these discussions. Let's try and prioritize cooperation over conflict, encourage meaningful dialogue, and do our bit to reconstruct the world order. Ladies and gentlemen, let's spread the message of peace. I trust all of you will. I would once again like to thank our dialogue partners, also our sponsors. WION Global Summit Dubai 2022 is driven by Maruti Suzuki, powered by Faber. Our tourism partner is Gujarat Tourism. Our hospitality partner is the Oberoi Dubai. Print partner UAE Khalij Times. And this event is in association with Car Dekho. Like I say every time, we'll see you next year, the same place. Take care, stay safe. Thank you.